Welcome back, everyone. I'm going to talk about a tool today that isn't in much use. It used to be years ago, everybody had one. If you're going to do some metal work, this is the one tool that you had to have, and that's a metal file. Now, I've talked to a lot of guys and they say you shouldn't be using a metal file today. On today's metal, it's thinner, you're taking off the E-coat, but I'm going to show you how you can still use this in certain situations. Now, these do take off the metal, they'll take off E-coat, any protective coating on the metal, but I don't know how many times I've seen guys, when they start working on a dent, first thing they do, they grab their big grinder or media wheel and they strip all the paint off. Well, when you're doing that, you're already taking the coatings off the metal, so you just took a big area off there that you shouldn't have. Years ago, what you used to do, it was called pick and file. The metal was a lot thicker, you had access behind a lot of panels, and you'd actually take your pick hammer, your dolly, you'd move out your low spots and you'd file this down, you'd file the metal down, it would actually shave it off, you wouldn't need any filler. Well, you can't do that anymore, but what you can do is use this to highlight your high and low spots, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Now here we got several dents in this fender. This one here was creased pretty good. I've done the usual prep work on it, bumped it out, got it close. Most of it was done using the off the dolly, which I've talked about in another video. You're going to take a body file. Now these you can adjust them. You can see you can put a lot of curve in them if you got a panel that's dished in quite a bit. You can flatten them out, or you can adjust it to fit the contour of the metal. So this here has a slight crown to it. So all I'm going to do is put a little bit of a crown in this. And what it's going to do, it's showing my high spots. Now I've already taken 80 grit on a DA and I've sanded some of this down, and that'll show high, low spots. Here there's a little sharp crease running through there, and that crease, it's so slight, but what it did, it was a little deep area, and if I were to bring that up anymore, it's going to overstretch the metal. So we're going to leave that. It's minimal. I don't want to put any more oil canning into the panel. There's a term I want to explain. Everybody has heard the term oil canning, and I've recently found out a lot of guys use that term but don't know where it came from. So let me explain that real quick before we move on. Okay, I've heard guys say, okay, you got oil canning in here. What is oil canning? Well, here's an oil can. I don't see any resemblance. I really don't know what that means. But here's what it means. And you don't see many of these anymore. This is an oil can. And on the bottom of it, to get the oil out, you pump it with your thumb. And as you can see, it pops in and out, up and down. So that's where that comes from. This metal, if we work it and overstretch it, it's going to be up too high. You push it down, it caves in and it stays there. It's always going up and down. You can't really, you know, it's tough to get rid of it once you have it in there, being you can't heat shrink anymore. So the best thing is try and work the metal without putting an oil can in there. So what we did with this file, as you can see here, there's a small dent right here. That shows us our high spots. Now the metal is nice and shiny where that file went over it, as opposed to when it did have the 80 grit DA marks in there. So what we're going to do, now I've talked about before, using the off dolly method, you can see the DA didn't really touch much here, didn't touch anything here, but we got a high spot there. So we're going to push on the back side of that. Now you can tell where you're at just by the sound of your hammer and dolly. You want to find the dolly underneath this low spot We're right there. You can hear it hit solid. You want to move it. To that area, put pressure up on it, and then you're going to lightly tap on the high spot. Now we'll come over here to this area. Our dolly is underneath here. We're going to put pressure up. Now do this very gently. Don't start wailing on it. You don't want to stretch it anymore. Now to double check it, you got to grab your DA. We'll get rid of those file marks with some 80 grit. And then we'll lightly take the file over it again. And it's still hitting very slightly right on this here, so you can keep doing it a little bit more. But what you want to do is even this whole thing out. You don't want to, if you leave this high and you figure, well, I'll bridge it, you're going to have a big pile of filler on here. So you want to take and kind of spread this out, bump these areas up in here, get this work down, and it's still going to be a little bit rough or uneven, but you want to try and minimize that. And you can put one coat of filler over this thing when you're ready, and you shouldn't have any issues. If you leave that and figure you're gonna deal with it after you got Bondo on it, you're just gonna have more problems, because you're gonna have another high spot. After you sand your Bondo, you're gonna start beating on it, you're gonna cave it in, you're gonna have oil canning in it. So, like I said, the file still has its use today. It's minimal what you're going to do with it. You don't want to be grinding or filing off the metal, but you use it just to find your high and low spots. And if you've watched my videos before where I was talking about leaving the paint on, that's what you want to do. That shows up, it's like a guide coat, plus you're not stripping all the coatings off the metal. Now you're going to take the DA again. And each time I do that, it gets better. You can use a straight edge on here to check it too, but this way, run your hand over it and you can feel we're still a little bit low here. We'll bring that up some. Now, this spot over here, that was pretty shiny. That was a little small dent, and we're going to do the same thing on that. We're going to hold the dolly underneath this area. And like I said, you can find it, find your dolly if you can't see underneath it by tapping on it. And you can hear it hit solid. So we're going to put the pressure on there very lightly. Hammer on that. Like I said, you're just going to run that DA over it to get the file marks out. You'll see your 80 grit marks in there. And that's almost perfect. It probably doesn't need any filler on it. Primer would take care of that. But these are just, this is another tool you can use. Like I said, years ago, if you picked up a hammer and dolly, you grabbed a file. You had to have a file. Anymore, you can use them if they're used in the right way, a little bit of practice with it. And like I said, you work on this and do it nice and slow. Use the hammer and dolly methods I've talked about. Use the file a little bit, leave your paint on, and you're gonna have probably one coat of filler on here is all you're gonna need. You're not gonna be putting it on, sanding it off, beating on it some more over and over and over. So if you practice these, and like anything, it takes time to get used to it, you know, to figure out how much pressure with the dolly, how hard you should hammer on it, how much filing, but in the long run, it'll pay off and you can get your work done a lot quicker, a lot straighter. So, as always, like, subscribe, leave a comment, anything else you can think of, go ahead and do it. Thanks for watching.